Question.
We got one guy here, man.
It's just a statement.
No.
It all depends on where I am going to ask
No,
a
it
question.
isn't.
But every question is prepped with a statement. The plumb line was dropped in the 1990s, but the plumb line is actually dropped in the 1886 Brussels-Berlin conference when it was decided that the borders of Iraq and Iran and Kuwait was taken away from Iraq. You drop it in 1991, you drop it in 79, but you drop it in 1886 and then in the First World War and the Second World War, where the British lost all their power, but the United States came up with power, understood the understanding of oil, and began to murder off a bunch of people. Now, my question is to you. If you drop the plumb line here, as Reverend James Montgomery would say, you drop the plumb line where you want to drop the plumb line and try to make a statement. We dropped the plumb line back when there was a power in the European nation trying to take over the oils and the rest of the damn blasted natural resources from the rest of the world.
Can we get to the question, please?
Which this country has built itself on the natural resources of others around the world. My question to you is,
Yes.
I am.
Yeah, okay, fine.
The question to you is that why should we, as a nation, go in behind a president whose grandfather established monies and gave the weaponry to the Hitler regime itself and supported the Hitler regime to do what it did to establish this fascist system that now we're under?
Okay, well, that contains all the elements of an excellent question, and I commend it to emulators. And I love the historical dimension because it's very important. Here's the situation. Actually, the greatest thing, in my opinion, that the Bolshevik Revolution did in 1917 was to publish the secret treaties of what had formerly been its allied powers in the First World War, about what their negotiations would consist of and their demands would be at the end of it. And these included the Sykes-Picot agreement between Britain and France, which was planned to lead to a carve-up of the Middle East, so that France would have Syria and Lebanon, and Britain would have what had been the vilayets of Mosul, Kirkuk, and Basra of the Ottoman Empire. Those three vilayets together make up what we now call Iraq. But there was no Iraqi border to redraw before then, if you get my meaning. And the autonomy of Kuwait as a separate entity had been established long before the Iraqi borders were drawn. So, roughly speaking, it corresponded to what the Mesopotamian provinces of the Ottoman Empire had been, and it's a very unhappy border, and always was, including under Turkish imperialism. What you need to know about the response to Lenin's policy in this respect is the following. I mean, there are many things, but this is the relevant one. President Woodrow Wilson, on finding out that that's what his allies were doing in the region, proclaimed his 14 points, calling for national self-determination in the region. And he didn't feel he could join the First World War if it was so obviously an imperialist war as these disclosures had revealed. That's important because we're bound by that decision too. Those 14 points include a promise of self-determination to Iraq, to the Kurds, who'd been enclosed against their will within the Iraqi state, to the Armenians and to the Palestinians. It's very important. I think Americans are also, to some extent, morally bound by it. And the more one investigates this history, the more one realizes what the depth and length of our responsibility is. And that was the point I hoped to make this evening in the first place. This does not start with the project for the new American century or any of this paranoid garbage that you hear.
This war does.
No, excuse me.
This war does.
No,
this war does, and I can demonstrate
this war started in 1991. Now, just to the gentleman's last question, which I'm answering, why, therefore, does America, or does the United States and its people have the right to decide, as with the Senate resolution of 1998, on a policy of regime change? How can we do this if George Bush's grandfather was a Nazi? Well, now, ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to consider carefully. If George Bush's grandfather's Nazism means that we cannot stick up for human rights, and if we can't have a policy of our own that differs from his, we really would be on a Bush plantation, wouldn't we? And we're not. We have the right to say that we want to reverse the evil of past policies, and precisely the evil of those past policies redoubles our responsibility to correct them. If I have to say this again, I will feel I've been wasting my time, and even worse, yours. Thanks.
I just want to say one brief thing here, right now, right here. This particular war here, I would like to invite Mr. Hitchens. I have a 2-hour radio show. Come on and debate me about this. I would like us to go head to head about this.
I already
war.
said yes.
And I will demonstrate to you all that this war is a result of all of these mad policy wonks that was in. Look. What happened was the inmates took over the asylum. The same people who were writing all those papers that George Bush Sr. called the crazies. And Colin Powell called the fucking crazies. These are the same people who ended up formulating all the policy of the Bush administration. And I can show you all the position papers. And you can see that that's exactly what happened. I have them here now. But I'm obviously not going to catch up. But I
we probably have time for two more questions.
And debate this.
Okay.
All right, if you believe